Okay, this next section, this final section, is titled Population, Poverty, and Other Determinants of Waste. And this first part is the growing problem of municipal solid waste, or MSW. So, what exactly is MSW? Well, it comes from households, small industrial enterprises, and municipalities. It is made up of paper, food scraps, yard trimmings, plastics, metals, rubber, leather, and textiles, wood, glass, and so forth. The the connection with population is from an economic sense. When there is increased population, there generally is going to be increased waste. And when there is increased density population, there will definitely be an increase in the waste involved, um, and an increase in municipal solid waste. Now, the trend for MSW for the USA: U.S. residents generate about 4.0 now 5 pounds of municipal solid waste per person, and more than any other organization, or more than any other OECD country except Denmark. Um, and the residents, this is interesting, the residents of Mexico, Japan, and the Czech Republic produce less than half as much waste per capita. I know we in our household work very hard to produce as less waste as possible. We spend an awful lot of time, well, my wife in particular, composting. And anything that is food scraps gets composted and turned into soil in my wife's garden. So that does reduce at least a little bit um, our MSW, as it were. Okay, so trash on vacation, barges of garbage. So this was an interesting section that your book has, and this is all about uh, a barge in New York City. This was in 1987. Departed New York with about 3,200 tons of trash, and New York's landfills were full, and they were trying to take this barge to different states in the country, and it turned out that no state would accept it, and so I had to go back to New York. There was another tale in 2002, refuse crews that went off and on for 16 years. Um, and there was 15,500 tons of ash with no place to go. The ash was hauled onto a barge called the Kian Sea, and there were no takers in Bermuda, Honduras, or Chile. And a load of 2,500 tons of the ash was dumped on a beach in Haiti, while the remaining 13,000 tons went deep sea diving. Oh my God, they dumped it into the ocean. Haiti did not want any of the trash and sent it on the barge Santa Lucia to Florida. And Florida spent over $600,000 shipping the ash to Hagerstown, Maryland, and then was trucked to the Mountain View landfill in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. Um, one very telling and fascinating quote. I was reading it and saying, "Are you kidding me?" Lawrence Summers, who was a big player in Barack Obama's presidency and was the president of Harvard University, had this quote, and you can read it in the book. The measurements of the cost of health impairing pollution depends on the foregone earnings from increased morbidity and mortality. From this point of view, a given amount of health impairing pollution should be done in the country with the lowest costs, which will be the country with the lowest wages. I think the economic logic behind dumping a load of toxic waste in the lowest wage country is impeccable, and we should face up to that. Oh my God. And I just put a note saying, wow, did he really say this? Um, but unfortunately, it's true. People in rich countries tend to dump their garbage and waste in areas where there are low wages and poverty levels. And I don't think it's any mistake that we have a major landfill called the Waimanalo Dump, not in Waimanalo, but in the west part of our island, by Nanakuli. Those of you who may live in Nanakuli know about the Waimanalo landfill in Nanakuli, Waianae area. Now this is an interesting picture, and your author calls it Glass Beach in Hawaii. And I was wondering, where is there a glass beach on Oahu? And I just did a little search on this on the internet, and it turns out that this particular beach is not on Oahu. It's on Kauai, on the west side, Poipu side. And this glass came from all kinds of deposits from a dump nearby, and glass that just came via the ocean. It is actually a little bit of a tourist attraction because you can just get all this interesting sea glass that is there. But that is all not natural. That comes from waste and refuse, glass bottles and the like, from Kauai and all over the world. Fascinating. And it's good. One of the reasons why I picked this book is that your author has a number of little Hawaii vignettes there, and this glass beach is one of them. Okay, this is a picture that shows trends in MSW generation, municipal solid waste. The green line is per capita waste generation per day, and you can see it is still positive, but it is actually gone down from 2000 to 2010. The number is still positive, but it has gone down. But because the population has also gone up, the total waste generation per year has definitely, it's leveled off a little bit, but it's definitely done a bit of increasing. Okay, let's see what else can we say about that. Oh yes, some countries in Western Europe, Belgium, Britain, Germany, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands have less than 10 years of landfill capacity left. The same is true for many U.S. states. And that tales of barges going here and going there is very telling about the lack of landfill space. We in Hawaii have had a long tradition of burning much of our waste and trash through a plant called H-Power that is in Campbell Industrial Park, and there are tours of the various trash facilities on Oahu, and it's called Tour de Trash. And I'm going to hopefully have us take a bit of a field trip there, and if not, maybe have the guy give a talk to our class, or some such thing. I've gone to H Power before, and it's out in Kapolei, and it is quite fascinating. Okay, demographic trends and the determinants of waste. So here we have a picture of a crowded Florida theme park with the caption saying, "The U.S. population growth rate is low, but our consumption per person is high. And it would take over 5 planets identical to the Earth to provide enough resources for everyone to consume at the rate of the average North American." And you can do an exercise like this on something called mycarbonfootprint.org. And this will be something that we'll be doing in class too, just to get a sense as to what our carbon footprint is, and if it's too high, what can we do about it? Now, sometimes what we can do about it is to take our waste and make it into something that is useful. So here, and this is something I grabbed from the internet, this is on your page 227. Resource use depends on the income is used. High incomes encourage consumption, but also the purchase of environmentally friendly good. This bench, as well as this bench here that you're looking at, is made from recycled plastic. So recycled plastic can wind up on beaches, and fortunately, it can also wind up as benches as well. Okay, so effects on education and income. education generally can make people more environmentally aware, and income affords opportunities for to spend money on conservation. So so things like recycling bins, composting systems, and product made from recycled materials generally cost more than their less ecological alternatives. So there was a study in 1976 that suggested that folks with higher incomes will generate more solid waste, um, but these high income groups will and they'll spend money on disposable items, but they'll and while that's true, it also people will also be aware of what they're doing and make choices for things like composting and recycling and the things like that. Um, so what does it say here about that? Education may teach alternatives to resource exploitation and convey the repercussions of waste. So education is kind of a two-edged sword there. Rural areas offer improved opportunities for composting and on-site disposal because of their lack of density. Um, Less opportunities for shopping, so less waste generation there. And there's the stereotypes of frugality among farmers in rural communities. Um, and a 1997 study by Callan and Thomas find that population density has a negative and significant effect on recycling levels. Interesting. Attitudes and culture. Native peoples have a much better attitude with regard to sustainability and lack of waste relative to those of us who are not, shall we say, native people. Um, these groups are found to produce less waste. This was study about Eskimo and Aleutian cultures. Um, and it's expected um, that the Asian, American Indian, Eskimo, and Aleutian and Pacific Islander population is expected to increase to 7% of the population. Okay, and what about age? Age may play an important role as well. Older folks might be a little more frugal than their younger counterparts. Um, and the over 65 population is expected to increase by 40 to 56%. In essence, the baby boomers are getting are getting definitely older. That has some what am I trying to say? That has some implications for Social Security, but it also may mean increased frugality. Let us hope so. Alrighty. I think our next to last line is about the role of economic growth in the environment. And you see a curve there that is an inverted U looking at pollution and income. First, let's build up to that. Simon Kuznets, a very famous economist, looked at data began with regard to income and inequality and saw that there was an inverted U relationship there. And in other words, increased income led to inequality up to a point, but further increased income decreased inequality. One of the outcomes of this is something called the Gini coefficient, and it's a measure of income inequality that equals 0 when everybody earns the same income, and 1 when the richest person in an economy earns all of the money. Poor countries have a low Gini coefficient. Wealthy countries have a higher Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient for Canada is 0.286, and for the United States is 0.430. I would think it might be. Would think it would be higher for the United States, especially in these days. Now there is something also called an environmental Kuznets curve, which is what you're looking at on the slide. Um, and what Grossman and Kruger in 1995 found this similar inverted U-shaped pattern. And Grossman and Kruger found that in most cases, pollution levels initially increased with income levels, but began to decrease when the income per capita reached around $15,000 to $17,000. The other findings have been inconclusive. Some other findings say that um, the curves begin as an inverted U, but then spring back up at incomes above 17,500 a year. So there is that this is a hope, but certainly hasn't been borne out by a lot of the data. And let's see, Paul Ehrlich and John Holdren um, looked at a relationship between environmental impact and growth, and you can see that on page 227, and 227 and 228. Environmental impact is a function of population, affluence, and technology. And then when they define affluence and technology and population and technology, they come up with the equation that you see there. Population, environmental impact is population times the pollution per person. And this equation suggests that we could cut the environmental footprint of human behavior, say 10%, by either cutting the population or the output per person or the pollution per output by 10% or some combination. So we can, we don't necessarily need to cut the population. We can cut the pollution per person and achieve roughly the same amount. So a big takeaway is that a decrease in the pollution per capita can be offset by an increase in the increase in the population. So that can hold as well. Okay, and then our final slide is just a picture of population density. This time not necessarily in an Indian city, but this is looking like Times Square to me. New York City, very, very intense population there, lots of folks walking. You never want to drive in Times Square. It's just too crazy. Take a subway and or walk. Alrighty, and this finishes chapter 9, Population Poverty and Economic Growth.